Thank you, Dr. Pratt. That was really complimentary. It's always interesting to hear people make remarks about you and who you are and kind of compare that to how you feel about yourself. It's really a privilege to be here, and it's been really exciting for me to see how Jewel is beginning to formally institutionalize these values of social justice as a part of the culture of William Jewell. It's always been a part of the students who come here, but now it's something that is planting intentional seeds. And I am so excited about the possibilities that exist within that. And it's been fun listening to some of the different project descriptions of each of the students here today, thinking about the things that I was thinking of and dreaming of when I was here, and also thinking of all the cool and fascinating things a lot of graduates I know have gone on to do as well. It's created a really exciting community. It makes me feel really proud to be a part of Jewell's alumni, and it makes me feel really proud to be from Missouri and Kansas City and this area. So I really want to thank you all for being a part of this conference today. And I really hope it becomes something that is a foundational part of Jewell's identity, and something that identifies it to other colleges, other institutions, and other organizations and people who are drawn to the light of social justice and problem solving. I'm glad that Jewell can kind of contribute to that. So I really want to thank Dr. Pratt, I want to thank Tim, I want to thank all the students who are involved in this. I want to thank each one of the speakers from this conference. It's been really humbling and so hard to decide which speakers to listen to, because there's been so many interesting voices here today. So I really want to thank each of you all for coming, and I encourage each one of you to reach out to them afterwards, learn from them, get their contact information, do what I always used to do called respectfully stalking people that you that you really admire, and I still do that. I have done that to people in this room, I think. But we've learned a lot together the last day and a half. And for me, I think I've been reminded again of how interconnected my life is, not only to those around you, to each one of you, but also to those who seem far away from me too. In my journey working on the issue of human trafficking, I found that when we peel away the terms, the particulars, the details that, while they're very important, can be overwhelming, we can find that it's a problem that is the sum of its parts. We can begin to understand the root causes, or the threads that make up this greater tapestry of vulnerability within our society and within our communities. And then suddenly a kind of logic can arise from what seems like pure chaos. We isolate individual threads pointing to inequities in health or in education, in wealth, manifestations of prejudice, lack of community. We discover that basic tangibles like infrastructure, teachers, or sanitation need revamping or support. Patterns emerge in human behavior. We can begin to see how different systems of thought or policies or laws create vulnerability and sustain vulnerability. It's at this point that productive problem solving can begin. The chaos can become a little bit more digestible, and as my dad always used to say, like eating the elephant one bite at a time. We all want to know how we can make a difference. And in my journey so far, I've actively built relationships with survivors of trafficking around the world in an attempt to break down the chaos, to try to isolate those threads of this tapestry and try to discover what questions need asking. When you start looking at a problem that's big, you don't even know what to ask. And usually, if you do it right, the questions will just lead to more questions and more questions and more questions, which is really exciting. So being a change maker is not necessarily always about doing something over there, something that feels abstracted or not really part of our reality. And I think that this is where we often get hung up and trying to figure out what it is that we can do. I think it's got a lot to do about paying attention to the things right here. And that's been a wonderful theme of this conference this week, is thinking about how all of these bits are interconnected. Talking about the simulation we had last night, and thinking about how by the very act that each one of us is in this room, we are part of the most privileged elite in this world. Sometimes we feel powerless, but we have to change our paradigm, and we have to think about how we can harness that power that we have. And in today's globalized reality, we've got to challenge ourselves to explore what it actually means to be a full citizen in our own spaces, in our own places. It's a kind of self-awareness that can actually give us more perspective and credibility if or when we turn our gaze outward to other communities around the world. So where do we start? I've got 3 basic ways we can begin to start answering that question. And the first one I like to say is know thyself. Do a personal inventory. So this includes a lot of different things, but the first thing is to know your own demons. You need to be aware of your own tensions and prejudices. You need to explore them and disarm them. They can lose their power the more we recognize them within our lives. Today I was at the Men Stopping Violence workshop. John did a really wonderful job of setting out the basic structures with like Gender Studies 101 about how violence is perpetuated and all of these systems that we live in. And until we make ourselves just a little bit aware of that, we don't even realize it. But we're part of that system, we're reinforcing that system, and we're creating a world that makes it less and less possible for us as individual men and women to be true to ourselves. Another thing that I think is important to think about as you know thyself is to think about what you bring to the table. What are your skills and talents? What energizes you? What do you enjoy doing in your free time? What technical or professional skills do you have? Think about what your friends or family members often ask you to do. There are a lot of things that each one of us enjoys and can bring to a situation. And maybe you don't even know what those are. So maybe you need to ask the people that you trust and love, what do you think I can bring to a situation? And explore that. Figure out what your personal assets are. And then, if that isn't working quite right, you can do what I've always done, and you just show up and say, hey, I want to do something. What can I do? And you just fill in the blanks. So, beg an organization or a person that you respect and want to learn from to give you something to do. Ask them to help if you can help them. Be persistent. People will take you up on it. And you never know whether we're cleaning the fish pond or reorganizing the library or shampooing the carpets will lead. Those are all things that I've done. The second thing, after knowing thyself, is to be curious and to listen. It's really important for us to observe our world and to initiate conversations, just like we're doing today, just like we did last night, and just like each one of you is going to be doing when you leave here today. It's important to try to understand both the oppressed and the oppressor. Invite each side to contribute to the solution. Try to understand how you're on either side in different situations and in different contexts. Listen with empathy. This means setting aside our assumptions. When we enter into a new reality, into a new situation with a new person from a different background, we've got to allow ourselves to suspend our personal moral understandings and convictions in order to truly listen and fully receive the gifts that they're offering us through their experience of the world. I really think that if we are not changed or challenged after working with new people in new places, then we might have a lot of inner work to do to examine our motives and our understandings. And the third thing I think that's important is to think big and act small. So it's important to see ourselves as a part of the whole. And so in order to do that, we've got to be visionaries. The most revolutionary ideas have to start small, and with dedication, evolve over time and become a part of culture, become a part of values. But until then, there's a tension and there's a fight there. Bill Drayton, who's the founder of Ashoka, which is the flagship for social entrepreneurship, which started really as a concept really in like the 1980s from their hard work, and today it's kind of almost like a catchphrase. It's almost diluted, we don't really know what it means anymore. He's a really fascinating person. He's an interesting person to study when you're trying to understand innovation and social change. But he kind of frames it like this. He encourages us to see our contributions as a constant, subtle adjustment going on at every point, all the time. So it's like seeing it as almost like a scientific certitude. Like each little piece that we're doing, and each piece that you're doing, each piece that your mom is doing or your brother is doing, it all will add up into this whole that's better. It's better each time, but it takes time. So in the meantime, we've got to create community and be community, and we've got to live our values in our everyday lives in different ways that we see appropriate. But it's hard because resistance to change is all around us. And let's consider that resistance to change is often rooted in fear. Fear that our power, our prestige, our identity, or our beliefs, or some core part of ourselves, some fundamental part of ourselves will be lost. We feel that tension every day in little ways, and sometimes really big ways, interacting with different people in our lives. So we have gathered this weekend to recognize and challenge those fears that exist within ourselves and within the world. And we have come to know that by embracing this so-called threat of change, we can actually propel each other forward towards our best selves, towards better versions of ourselves. It might seem kind of scary at first. We might have to let go of some inhibitions and step into something that's unknown at first. But in doing so, we'll come to know that we can embrace that threat of change. We can be better versions of ourselves. We can find that those fundamental ingredients of our selfhood are actually enhanced and not stifled. And so I think that when we're able to do these things together as a community, we don't necessarily have to convince those around us that we're doing the right thing. We just have to show them by the way that we live our lives every day. So I'd like to challenge each one of you all to think about how all those threads of this tapestry are knitted into your life, into my life, into the lives of your families and your friends, into the social and cultural dynamics that shape you and form you and inform the way that we speak and the way that we interact with each other and the language that we use and in the ways that we spend our money. Let's think about those things, and let's remember that our world is getting smaller and smaller every day. I'd like to end with a poem that I really love. Rumi is a Sufi mystic, and I've really become enamored with Sufi mystics in the last 4 years or so because their ability to share and tweak different truths of the world, sometimes in a playful but really honest way. And Rumi says, "You knock at the door of reality. You shake open your thought wings. You loosen your shoulders, and you open." So let's open.